Well, hello and welcome. Thanks for joining this week's conversation. We have gathered a great panel of 3 local government leaders, and we're going to be exploring how these communities are incorporating engagement into the work they're doing as they start getting geared up for the American Rescue Plan, as well as just how they're using general engagement for helping the work that they do and advancing the plans that they have going on in the community. My name is Matt Fulton. I'm the Vice President for National Engagement for a company called Polco. We do a lot of work with communities around engagement and helping to track performance in ways that incorporate values of residents and incorporating resident sentiment and those types of things. Our hope today is that as you listen to these local government leaders, that you'll learn something new, you'll gain a new perspective, you'll find something that you'll benefit from and be able to use in your operations for the work that you're doing. The day goes forward, pretty straightforward. I'll do a quick introduction of the panel, and then we'll introduce the topic and get into the questions for the panel. I'll be asking each of them 3 questions around the topic of engagement. At the end of that, we'll provide a little bit of opportunity for any questions that they have or interactions that they want to have with each other. Maybe they want to add a little bit to the comments that they have already shared. And then we will wrap it up. And the session generally takes about an hour, but I'm really just kind of glad that the panelists are here and that you'll all be able to benefit from the input. Let me introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Molly Martin, who's the Director of Economic Development in Keene, Texas. Finding a career in local government sometimes comes in a circuitous path, and Molly's journey is certainly an example of that. She started in the restaurant business at a casino, where she had just huge responsibilities overseeing operations and people. With that early business experience, she then went on to rejuvenate a bowling center, made that into a quick success, and then entered into a partnership creating a healthy chia tea company and became a co-owner of MT Cup Tea. After she sold both of those businesses, Molly was ready for a change, and she finally found her path to the city of Keene. She's been with the city of Keene for about 11 years, but she served in several capacities, but was able to land her dream job as the Director of Economic Development in 2019. She's an outdoors person and does a lot of adrenaline-driven kinds of activities. Her favorite all-time activity is playing sand volleyball. Molly, thank you for joining the conversation today, and I would certainly welcome you to add a little bit more to your background.
Thank you very much. As you commented, this is actually the first city I've been with in regards to city government. And I can't say enough that picking a small city like this to cut your teeth on, because you literally are diving into several different departments. I started out in the court department and just worked my way up the ladder from there, going into planning and development, working as the assistant city manager as well, and then kind of migrating into economic development. My original path was to continue to be an assistant city manager and then city manager one day until I got the taste of economic development. I absolutely love it, and I don't see myself migrating off that path, to be honest with you. I absolutely love it. It's very rewarding, very rewarding.
Well, you've got such a great history and experiences in the business world. And so it makes a lot of sense that you would resonate towards doing economic development. And I'm excited to just learn a little bit more today from you about how in that economic development world, you're incorporating the needs of residents and the input and expectations and those kinds of things. So Molly, thanks for joining the conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Let me introduce our second panelist. Corrin Wendell is the Director of Community Development and Planning for the city of Little Canada, Minnesota. Little Canada is a community in the Minneapolis-St. Paul metropolitan area that really has just got a lot of stuff going on. And I'm sure that Corrin has been very involved in a lot of that activity. She comes with a really strong planning experience, particularly in focusing around regional planning activities. And in the metropolitan area, in the suburban environment, that type of skill set becomes a really important aspect. She's got a bachelor's of science degree in architecture and a master's in city and regional planning. And what's really intriguing and really exciting, Corrin, as I saw your bio is just the work that you're doing around engagement and working with professional women in government, particularly in the planning area, as well as a youth engagement. And hopefully we'll be able to learn a little bit more about the work that you're doing in those areas. I would just thank you for jumping into this conversation. Corrin is here as a to help fill a cancellation that we recently had. And so I appreciate you being here. And could you just share a little bit more about your background, Corrin?
Sure, and thank you so much for the invitation. I do appreciate it. And this is something that, of course, goes hand in hand with any of the planning that we do in the city. And so I became a planner right after grad school. So I've been a planner for the city of Columbus in Ohio, and then down in Georgia, south of Atlanta, and then up here in Minnesota. And so through those experiences as a city planner and now community development director, and also working for the Met Council as a regional planner, it's been just a great kind of a building of those skills and passion for planning. I do chair the APA Women in Planning Division, where we support and empower women in planning, and then also the founder of YEP, Youth Engagement Planning, where we reach out to kids K through 12 and teach them about urban planning and get them on the pipeline to this career. And so that's been really kind of fulfilling in so many ways. And a lot of those skills do translate into what we do for the city of Little Canada. So it's been really exciting to pair those together.
That is so cool that you're actually trying to give kids a path to city planning. So
Yes.
That's great. Thank you so much, Corrin, for being here. Let me introduce our third panelist, Emily Lewis. Joined the Charlotte County Board of County Commissioners back in 2016 and currently serves as the Deputy County Administrator for the county. She's got a wide array of important responsibilities and oversight, areas like public safety, public works, community services, tourism, public information, legislative affairs. I mean, gosh, Emily, that's a wide array of responsibilities. She spends a lot of time helping to develop a stronger organizational culture and around special initiatives and strategic planning types of items. She has been recognized as one of Gulf Shore Business Magazine's top 40 under 40 in Southwest Florida, which is a great recognition. And always love to see people who are active in ICMA and in the Florida City County Management Association. Emily, thank you for being here and would welcome you to add a little bit more to your background.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and be a part of the conversation today. I actually started with Charlotte County back in 2006. I have somewhat of a non-traditional background for a county administrator, deputy county administrator. My background's in human services. Prior to that, I worked in the private sector in organizational development. So I've kind of always centered my career around people. I got my foray into administration through the legislative affairs role for our community, and I was our in-house lobbyist. So I got to learn a lot about roads and water and all of the environmental issues that we deal with. But it really comes back to the people that we serve and the people that work for our organization. They are our biggest assets. So I enjoy getting to move some of our bigger and broader initiatives forward in this role and take on some of the big challenges that we have in our community.
Yeah, it's nice to have you here, particularly as a county person. The role that county government played in the pandemic really was such a valuable role just to help communities survive. And really hope to hear a little bit more about how that experience worked for you and how you incorporated people's input during that process. So thank you for
Absolutely.
being part of the panel today.
Thank you.
Well, let's kind of kick into the topic. The topic of the conversation is the value of community engagement under the American Rescue Plan Act. You know, the last 15, 16 months have just totally uprooted and disturbed everything that we knew about normalcy, from communities' perspectives, from organizational perspectives, just from a personal standpoint. And what might have been a priority back in 2018 very well may not be a priority today, particularly as you think about all of the issues and impacts from a public health, economic development, public safety, all of those kinds of things that people generally take for granted. Now we're at the forefront of needs and priorities and expectations. And so as you start to think about how communities operate and how organizations and local governments need to work to succeed and to sustain and to recover, priorities have changed. And so how do you go about engaging residents in an authentic way, in a way where they really understand that their voices are being heard? Local government, engagement in local government has always been difficult. And so the challenges of now engaging with people while you've got all of the kind of resultant impacts of the pandemic just becomes all that much more important to pay attention to and to think about, okay, so what can you do differently, or what can you do in a way that's really going to help residents understand where they fit into the decision-making process. Of course, we're in now a new virtual world, and so I'm excited to hear a little bit about how you have benefited from engaging virtually. But people's lives are still busy, and so the notion of making it convenient for residents and stakeholders of the community to be involved while you're trying to understand where community needs and where community priorities are. It just becomes a challenge that we're trying to pull what's working well for you and what are your solutions that you would offer up to other local government leaders who are running into the same issues and trying to solve the same problems. This becomes a really meaningful conversation. So there are 3 questions that we wanted to pose to all of you. The first one is, how are you identifying community needs and priorities that you'll be addressing using the ARPA resources that are coming in, these federal dollars? The second is, how does resident input impact or guide the delivery of the public services that you have in the community? What role are they playing in helping you to helping you in that decision-making process? And then finally, what are the strategies and tools that you're finding successful for engaging those residents and stakeholders, as well as tracking performance? And particularly as you think about that response, if there's anything that you can suggest to others around how to reach those hard to reach populations, that would be really helpful to include in your conversations. And so I'm excited to get into the conversation. And Molly, I'm going to start with you with the first question. Can you just talk a little bit about how you're going about identifying community needs and priorities that you're going to be thinking about as you start to use these ARPA funds?
So I think everybody on this panel would agree with me that community input's always been the utmost importance. We can't be everywhere. We don't know everything, so we depend on them. So we have a very good relationship with our school district as well. So what better source than to go to your school district when the teachers are talking to the parents, seeing the kids, know what the needs are throughout the community. And quality of life is what our main priority is as well. So in economic development, of course, most people think it's just about bringing in businesses and creating jobs, but one of the big priorities to us is that quality of life. Texas has fared a little bit better than everybody else, and I think Florida as well. When it comes to, we were all hit hard by the pandemic. We all know that. But when you work for a smaller city or live in a smaller city, it's a little bit easier for your residents to shop local, really, try to help out that dynamic. So my sales tax for my city is higher than it was the years previous of the pandemic. And I don't know if the rest of you had that same effect or if it was different. We opened up quicker. It was very important for us to get people back to work and get to start thriving. But to go back to the question, is I communicate a lot with my local businesses, our school district, the community in general. Social media, as you said, everything's digital nowadays. You listen. I think the most important thing to do is listen. Everybody's opinion matters. So we obviously have a Facebook page. We implemented a weekly podcast, kind of what you're doing here. And we solicit questions, or we just simply educate the community on what's going on, so they know that we're actually here doing something, where their voices are being heard. It could be anywhere from, hey, this is a heavily walked street that we need some sidewalks. And because there's so much traffic, these people are walking on the road. And so if we don't travel that often, we may not know that. So it's just simple things like that. But when it comes to the American Rescue Plan, we have so much growth happening right here in our city. Our residential development is blowing up. I have a lot of homes coming in within the next 2 to 3 years. So with the American Rescue Act, we're using some of those funds to upgrade our very old infrastructure within our city. So because we're going to need to make sure we can accommodate this growth that's coming in, whether it be commercial, residential, anything like that. But that's what we do. We're constantly reaching out, whether it's our police department. So just recently, our police chief, our fire chief, and our city manager, we had this come in like this coffee talk. We met at the local coffee shop and we publicized it and said, come on down, coffee's on us. Just come down. Let's talk, let's chat. Let's see if we can, work with any of the issues that we're having, tell us the bad things, tell us the good things. At the end of the day, we're servant leaders and we're here for the community.
Molly, did you have a strategic plan in place that then is now being redone in lieu of the pandemic, or much of a shift there?
Yes, earlier when Corrin had mentioned that what they're doing, we're doing the exact same thing. We had one created back in 2016, which how quickly those can expire with depending on how quickly your city is growing. So we are in the process right now. We are vetting some companies to do a brand new comprehensive plan. Same thing with the zoning. Our zoning needs to be, restructured. Our plans have changed because of growth. We were a smaller city and we're stuck in between two larger cities. We're about 30 minutes south of Fort Worth. And now everybody's like, we're being discovered. And we weren't prepared for that. So now we're like, okay, now we have to make up for that. So yes, so now we are generating a whole brand new comprehensive plan, zoning plan, and so forth.
Yeah. Cool environment to work in for sure. And I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about the podcast when we get to the third question today. Corrin, can you talk about how you are going about identifying community needs and priorities in Little Canada as you start to kind of gear on the post-pandemic era?
Yes, and with that, our 2040 comprehensive plan to start actually as sort of our framework was adopted last December. And so with those kind of strategies and objectives, we do have an implementation schedule for that. And so we are underway with our zoning code update. And then also along that path is our strategic plan. So at our city council workshop last night, we're about 75% done with the goals and objectives that we had about 2 to 3 years ago. And so we're just on that cusp of having maybe a full update of that in the next coming months, along with identifying strategies for, the rescue plan to incorporate those into our goals that are now, at the forefront that weren't there 2 to 3 years ago. And so we're using that as sort of that framework or foundation for implementing some of these newer things that we're going to need for our city. But what we tend to do is we kind of do our community kind of capacity inventory. What are the areas in our community that are important to focus on? And so we go to our different citizen associations, community centers, senior groups. We go out to the schools, as Molly mentioned, looking at other public services that we have, other organizations, our churches, and then looking at, of course, our private sector. All of our businesses we reach out to, and then also our senior population, our youth population, and try and get that full inventory of where everyone is in this moment. And then we are trying to map those. We're trying to kind of create a framework visually where we can say, where are the needs? Where are people falling short? How can we kind of partner with our county? Ramsey County is very important in our region. In Minnesota, we like to work all together. So our 7-county metro, when one does well, everyone does well. So we're trying to compare and contrast information and who's using funding for what, so that we're not overlapping or we're not duplicating efforts. We're trying to kind of use it as full force as possible. And then taking in that mapping, we go ahead and we prioritize those needs. And so with that new strategic plan kind of update that we're going to be doing, we're going to identify what are the needs that are most important right now, and then can we prioritize those? And then we're going to have to look again at our CIP, so our capital improvements, and then also in our implementation schedule, how can we budget for these items? How can we use those funds in order to implement those new needs that have come up? And some of those for us are related to water, to wastewater, stormwater, infrastructure, as Molly has mentioned, getting people up and running if there's needs for broadband, and then if we have any budget shortfalls in our own budget, we'll be able to incorporate that as well. So we're trying to take a comprehensive look at how the funds can really drive our needs of the community, but then also the goals that have set for the last 5, 10, 15 years.
That's great, Corrin. Are you, with your work with Ramsey County, are you anticipating, are there any particular areas that you think you'll be successful in doing more regional applications or more regional service delivery? Any particular areas you would think that may be more likely than others?
Yes, I definitely think that in the economic development department, since we are a smaller city, we have kind of a staff, one person, for each kind of department. And so they're a huge help to us in the economic development department. So we can do some of it from our end, but then we really rely heavily on them. And they just came out with an economic development and inclusion plan for the entire county. And so we're hoping to tap into that in terms of maybe doing a corridor, plan for one of our corridors, Rice Street, which is important economic development corridor for us for businesses and new multifamily developments. And then also they have other kind of more on the health side too, identifying areas where we have some of our health shortfalls for folks in our city and then in the county. And so public health is really important, but not a department that we have per se. So we rely heavily on them to identify those needs.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good luck with that. I think that some of those regional applications make a lot of sense, particularly now as communities are trying to think transformationally with the use of these funds. So congratulations on that. Thank you. Emily, can you talk about how Charlotte County is identifying your community needs and priorities as you get ready to spend the ARPA funds?
Sure. So before I do, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Charlotte County. So we are a mid-sized county in the state of Florida, a population of about 180,000. With a very heavy snowbird population. So during the summer, during the winter months, we grow to about 300,000. We only have one incorporated city in the entire county. And so the county is providing a lot of municipal services. For us, it comes back to our strategic plan and how we engage citizens in the strategic planning process to give us input. We do that every other year. We work on a 2-year budget. So every other year we survey our citizens on the delivery of services and what their needs are. As terrible as COVID was for everyone, it created some opportunities for us as a community to develop deeper relationships. We work very well together in this community, but we were able to use vaccination sites, and we developed a Communities Act, a COAD. It's a Community Organizations Active in Disasters. It's really a network of nonprofits that are really engaged with our citizens on what their needs are, helped us to be responsive as a community to whatever the human services needs for, whether there were, isolated individuals that needed services. We were able to identify that through that group. And it also helped us direct funding for needed services, especially in those underserved communities that don't typically engage with local government. The other thing about Charlotte County that's a little bit unique is that we have a lot of municipal service benefit units. So there's about 70 of them in our community, and it really allows funding to be directed to the communities that need it the most, and those residents to be able to provide input into the work plans and how we spend funds within their neighborhood. So we use that network of citizens very heavily to give us feedback on what their priorities are. So when we were developing our CARES funding plan, we used a lot of that feedback to develop that funding model, and we'll do the same with ARPA once we have final guidance.
Emily, I'm wondering, I would really love to hear a little bit more about the input that you're getting through these 70 different neighborhood groups. When we get to the third question, just a general question though, do you think that participation levels or engagement levels increased during the pandemic? Or what would you say about that?
I actually do think engagement levels increased. It just shifted into a different modality. So we have a high retirement population. So typical print media is very effective in our community. We have been dabbling into social media. I think with everything shutting down, the pandemic really forced us to get creative with how we did outreach. We started doing virtual meetings, which for a lot of our residents was a challenge to figure out how to do virtual meetings and how to engage that way. But I think we overcame that. We also started doing pickup services at our library. So instead of coming in, residents could drive up and receive. So we used that as an outreach avenue too, because for some of our residents, that was the only time that they interacted with other humans was when they were picking up their library books. So we got creative, and we also have an alert program, a text message alert for our residents. We saw enrollment in that service increase like 350%. So we were very, very happy with the number of residents that signed up for that service.
Oh, that's really interesting. Huh. Our research would say that during the pandemic, trust in local government actually increased, and our research has shown that engagement levels have increased. But if you think about it, it's those kind of alert systems and using those local services that people all of a sudden needed to rely upon. I think people really took a much greater, they place a lot greater value on the services that local government provides. And of course, now as we're entering into this new era, the challenge is how do we keep that going and those connections ongoing. So yeah, thank you. Good work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's shift over to the second question. And Corrin, I'd like to start with you on this one. Corrin, can you talk about how community input influences how resident and business needs are met in Little Canada?
Yes, of course. Similar to our other panelists, our community input is vital to how we operate in the city, and we use that on a day-to-day basis. But we also are able to capitalize on that when we're doing these larger efforts, as in the comprehensive plan, our zoning code update, even our CIP and strategic plan and budget. Everything is obviously open to the public. People are invited to comment. During the pandemic, people were quick to transition to virtual. We did have an increase in folks coming to planning commission meetings, city council meetings, being invited to be a part of our newsletter. We did receive sort of more requests to receive that in their inboxes. And then also be a part of our social media. So we have our Facebook page and even our website where we would give people, regular updates on what was happening at the city. We also are kind of undergoing a park master plan. And so we were able to partner with the University of Minnesota and have some of their grad students reach out virtually to over 600 youth in elementary and middle school, which was wonderful during that process. And then also back out to the public. So we did some online polling, online surveys, and actually our surveys were up more than we've ever seen. So I think people were really paying attention to these opportunities, especially being at home. What can we be doing to stay, engaged with the city? And we were able to receive great feedback for all of those efforts. And so we continue to, tap into our community. And now that things are starting to loosen up, we want to reach back out, with those open houses, with those more in-person focus groups. We do a lot of personal interviews. We go out to businesses, we go out to community organizations and sit with various groups and try and meet people where they're at in those regards. And then to be able to bring it back to, a full city council meeting and share with them all of the engagement that is happening. But it is a day-to-day engagement that is sustained over time. And then we really strengthen those relationships that then we can tap into when we need them for those bigger projects or just on the day-to-day sort of feedback for things that we're conducting at the city.
Corrin, it's interesting. So during the pandemic, when you were doing projects and interacting with the community virtually, did your engagement levels go up? And do you think that because of that, you were benefiting from a greater voice in the community about how to design a project or how to move a project forward?
Absolutely. I think people were definitely more engaged and also providing probably more feedback than they normally would, maybe because their day was not as busy as it used to be. So they had more time to share all full thoughts, all the thoughts, which is great. So I think we got a more well-rounded group of folks within the city. And, we're a city of about 10,000. So when we receive, 3,000 surveys, I mean, that's a big deal, for us percentage wise, when maybe it's just a couple hundred in other cases. So it's really been kind of an eye opener. How can we sustain this, and how can we, engage with our residents that it's meaningful and that they feel engaged and they feel heard. And that's really important to us.
Yeah, that's super. That's great. Great response on those surveys for sure. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, that's outstanding stuff. Thank you. Emily, can you talk about how community input influences the services that you deliver?
Sure. So I mentioned earlier that we do a 2-year budget. So we are constantly, it allows us in the off year, rather than spending our time on planning budget, because we've already got a budget approved, we spend time on engaging our citizens and talking about project planning and community planning. And so that second year allows our fiscal staff really to host series of workshops with our residents to get them engaged. Obviously, with COVID, that shifted how we did that. We went more to a virtual platform. At the same time, during COVID, we do a 6-year sales tax in Charlotte County. So 2020 was a sales tax year for referendum. And so we had to shift kind of how we engage the community in conversations about which projects should be on that list, and also in educating the community about what's coming in the next sales tax and why they should support it. So I laugh jokingly and say we do everything by committee in Charlotte County, but we really do try to use a lot of citizen-driven input to develop our community needs assessments and our capital improvements program. And definitely in our sales tax, that is led by a 21-member citizen committee that develops the projects based on staff inputs and what we see from neighborhood, from our MSBUs, and giving us input on what projects they'd like to see. That 21-member committee develops the recommendations that go to the Board of County Commissioners for which projects should be on the referendum. And so this past year with COVID and trying to educate the community, certainly we weren't able to do our typical HOA presentations or community civic presentations. We did a lot of Facebook Lives. We started using Nextdoor, which is a new social media app that kind of blew up during COVID. We use that as a way to host some virtual town hall meetings with neighborhoods and get the word out in that manner.
Well, that's really interesting. How often do you have to go out for a referendum on your sales tax?
We do it every 6 years.
Every 6 years. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And you have a 21-member group of citizens that help you just kind of think through what are the priorities and what are the important issues?
Correct. And they look at everything from water quality to quality of life projects, parks, public safety projects. So it's a pretty well-rounded list.
Yeah. And just really quickly, do you find that HOA involvement has increased and become more relevant over the last several years?
It certainly was in the past. Our main source of getting information out during COVID, we had to get a little bit more creative. We have a tremendous, I think I mentioned before, our libraries went to a drive-up service, and that service was used. We actually saw more traffic to that than we did in our actual libraries when they were open. And so we use that as a mechanism for getting the word out to those individuals about the projects that they care most about.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. You have a lot of really cool things going on. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Molly, can you talk about how community input influences how resident and business needs are met in Keene?
Well, I think we're all kind of mirroring the same. We all kind of have the same concept going on in our cities. But, like I had said before, we all know their input's extremely important. So we had discussed the same things about creating like an input committee to where they could meet at least once a month. We have a community center that's attached to our city hall to make it even more convenient. We use the same social media platform, the podcast, like I had mentioned earlier. One of the greatest things that they had mentioned previously was the pandemic did bring our citizens and the city closer together. And we also have an older population that the digital side, the social media side was extremely uncomfortable for them. And we did close our city hall, but as employees, we showed up to work every single day. So some of this older generation, they were forced to find another way to pay their bills, their water bill, trash bill, sewer bill when they came in. And it was a really big struggle for them. So it was one of the things to where, our police department was involved, our fire department was involved. We delivered food to these homes, or we would do welfare checks. And so to me, I think that was more of a blessing in a way that some of these events had happened, because and this is something that we've continued to do. Even after everybody is open, we still do regular, welfare checks. And so it's opportunities like that and the outreach that has really, I think, broadened our awareness of what's happening in our city. It even goes as far as like the police coverage. And, the citizens are very proud of where they live. And so they're going to let you know what's going on in a neighborhood to beef up that kind of coverage. So, it's just that platform in general, the social media platform and the committees that you're creating, and really just listening to your citizens to bring forth what they desire.
It seems as though you actually, you found a positive side of the pandemic because it brought your community closer together. And it just kind of goes back to the point that the trust in your local government and the people who are serving you, people started to really understand the value and the importance and, that direct impact on the quality of life that they have every day. So, if you can build that trust factor, your ability to deliver services in a meaningful way and to kind of weather the storm when things don't go quite right, if you've got those relationships built up, it sounds like you have done a really nice job in Keene to build those relationships that will benefit you certainly long term. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes, and it's one of those things to where we're always want to talk to the citizens. We have nothing to hide here. And it probably looks like to the general public that we just sit here and do nothing all day. They have no idea what goes on behind the curtain. And once they realize that, it's eye-opening to them. And there's a greater appreciation of what we're doing inside this building. For instance, in my position, they might see a Starbucks pop up one day. I'm like, oh, that's quick. Well, yeah, I don't have a Starbucks here, but things like that. You're talking, it takes years. You may be discussing this for 2 years with a company, and then they're like, wow, you're so fast. I'm like, yeah, that's 2 years. It's not as fast. Right. So we're moving and shaking, behind the scenes back here, but they don't realize that. But once they're educated in that, and that's what we try to push out to let them know that we want you to be just as much as a part of the process, so how the wheel is turned, so to speak. So
true. Yeah. Well said. Thank you. Let's kick over to the third question. And I'd love to hear about the tools that you're using to measure feedback and just really get a better understanding. What systems you have in place for helping you to track your performance? Emily, can you talk about the strategies and tools that you're finding successful for engaging residents and helping you to understand how well you're doing?
So sorry about that. So yeah, absolutely. I think I have to say, Molly hit the nail on the head. Most people don't know what's going on in local government unless something goes wrong, right? So unless your garbage is not picked up, or there's a sewer pipe that breaks and it's flooding your street, you really don't have a need to engage with your local government. I think COVID really highlighted the role that local governments play in a number of things, from disaster planning and response to basic human needs. In Charlotte County, we We measure our performance a number of ways. We have, again, our biannual citizen input survey that we use. We have an app in our community where neighbors or residents can provide us feedback on issues that they have, whether it be a need for mosquito control, or there's a pothole in front of their house, or if they want to find out where local services are. It's a way for them to engage with us routinely. Our social media channels, again, are another great tool for citizens to ask questions, get responsive answers from our staff, and engage with staff. I think in terms of some of the more innovative strategies we've used, we have a citizen academy that we initiated. We just resumed that this year. That's a great group of individuals that come in to learn more about local government and give us feedback on how we're delivering services and how we're doing as a local government and meeting their needs. So it's, we've kind of turned lemons into lemonade, but we're using some of the new programs, new ways we're reaching people through COVID to help become best practices and models for how we deliver services in the future.
Emily, are you organizing? I want to kind of just visit just quickly on these neighborhood groups that you use. Do you gather input from them on any kind of organized way to understand differences between one neighborhood or another? Or is it really just for an overall sounding board?
So typically those MSBs are established for a specific purpose. So they're looking at either their street drainage or they're looking at stormwater needs for the communities. They're very focused. However, the residents that participate in those groups are very vocal with us about the things that they need, even if it's outside of the scope of their MSBU. So our staff brings that back to us through citizen comments that are made in those meetings, the things that we need to be on the lookout for, that we need to be considering as we're developing plans.
Is that something that you would recommend to other local governments to consider doing?
Yes and no. It depends on the makeup of your community. For Charlotte County, it works. Again, we only have one incorporated city. So for a large county government to be able to provide municipal services, it is the easiest way for us to get citizen input at those micro levels, because typically we're pretty macro in how we look at service delivery. So cities have the unique ability to have that look and feel of a downtown and those gathering places that cities create. Counties typically handle it a little bit differently, and so for us, it works very well. I think if we were organized differently, I'm not sure how that would work.
Okay, yeah. That's cool. That makes all the sense in the world. Yeah, people are organized. Their community is closest to their patio, and so organizing at a neighborhood level, but in an unincorporated way, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you. Good job. Really appreciate it. Molly, can you talk about the strategies and the tools that you're finding successful for engaging residents and tracking performance in Keene?
Okay, so one of the things that we're very proud of, and I don't know what took us so long to do this, but as I mentioned in the very beginning, we did implement a podcast. And because we were getting so many negative comments coming through, it could be anywhere from, why did you use that grant money for a monument sign instead of fixing the streets? Or, things like that they don't quite understand what certain money is allocated. And as you guys all know, we have our money allocated in certain line items within our budget that can't be used for anything else. And just putting that education out into the public helps drastically. So this podcast, we do it weekly. We had hired a local, a former graduate of SWAU. We have a Seventh-day Adventist University here in our city. And he collects questions from the community weekly. And then we have a staff member, usually it's our mayor that comes on there. Sometimes it's our city manager, sometimes it's our HR director, sometimes it's me, sometimes it's, somebody throughout the, the city that will respond to these questions. So ever since we've been doing this podcast to educate and put it out there, what the city's actually doing and why it takes so long to handle some of these issues and why we can't use this certain amount of money to fix potholes in this particular street or put sidewalks in. So the negative comments have decreased and the positive feedback has increased drastically. So that was probably one of the most successful things that we have done to try to get that information out there. And people seem to love it. And so we're going to continue doing that, and just to help get things through. So what we'll do as well is we'll probably upgrade that a little bit too, and kind of let them know now what's to come. Originally, it was created to help these people understand why certain things can't be done. And now we're going to broaden it a little bit more to let them know what's coming down the pipe for the city, or the events that we're working on, the projects that we're working on. Are we redoing this road? Are we upgrading the park? So that's been very successful for us.
I think that's really great. So it's weekly. One of the nice things, I looked at some of the agendas for the podcast recently, and the other aspect that you have taken advantage of is introducing the community to some of your staff people. So that actually puts a life in front of that name or that responsibility that they have. And so you become a resident of the community instead of just a city employee. I think it's a really innovative and creative way to engage with your public and help them learn about what the things are and the pressures and the challenges. So good job.
And they get the inside of the city.
Yeah. Do you have any metrics that you follow as you kind of think about your performance in your strategic plan or some of the work that you're doing, just to kind of track how well you're doing?
I mean, what I do, yes. So, we have so much development happening here. And so we're always looking, well, your citizens are going to let you know how you're doing. That's your biggest metrics right there. And so if you're getting positive feedback from the citizens, that's huge. So I would have to say that's probably one of my biggest gauges, is you communicate with them. How are we doing? How do you think we're doing? Where do you think we can improve? So that's probably one of the dynamics that we'll focus on.
Yeah, with such great development, I mean, that's you've got a lot of stuff that you can kind of point to that can demonstrate the progress and the success that you're doing as a community, particularly in your department. So yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Corrin, can you talk about the strategies and tools that you're finding successful in Little Canada for engaging residents and helping to demonstrate performance?
Yeah, definitely. And around that strategic plan conversation, to be able to track our progress there is very important. And so every 6 months or so, we have been allocating time to looking at how our spreadsheet looks. And so we put all of our goals and objectives in there, and then our responsibility, which party's responsible for that, what's the implementation timeline for it, and then to be able to give updates, where are we in year 1, year 2, and then what's ongoing. And so we end up kind of highlighting those areas so that it's more of a visual practice. So when you're looking at it, you can see, how many areas are kind of lit up, so they're complete or, on their way, and what areas are left to be, completed. And so we present that with, our staff, and then also with council, and to be able to gauge where we are. And then, as I mentioned before, we're going to be kind of doing an update on that. What are some new areas that we can incorporate, so that it's kind of a rolling task list, if you will, kind of an action plan. That's kind of, there's no ending point. We're going to add to it. Things will roll off, and new things will arrive, which is great. And then through engaging with our community, of course, with the pandemic, we went virtual. So we did, utilize our newsletter and our social media to be able to do polling, to do surveys, to direct people to efforts that were ongoing. So to be able to link documents, even as we're doing our zoning code update, link them to the actual memos and the different conversations that are happening at the planning commission level and the city council level, to be able to reach out directly to the business owners. So having those phone calls with them, and then soon we're going to be transitioning back to focus groups and in-person meetings with them, and engaging, of course, with our youth. We're able to do that through Zoom, and to be able to go into the classroom, we're able to teach about urban planning, but then also say, well, as part of this interaction, we also want to know what can you foresee for your park coming up here in the next couple of years. And so they were able to color and create their ideal park, to be able able to label it and give us kind of clear direction on, what they see. They can be the residents in the next, 20, 30 years, staying in Little Canada. So their voices are very important to what we do. And so it's been kind of an ebb and flow. We've kind of pressed hard on these virtual tools and then kind of let up on our traditional tools. And then now that we're kind of getting back into a little bit of normalcy, we're really trying to use both. And so we want to make sure that we emphasize access for people. What is the best, measure of engagement for you, within the city? And so some people may want to stay virtual. Some people may want to have that face-to-face interaction. So we're trying to make sure that we can expand that and provide opportunities and really kind of incorporate them as we get into different projects. And so it's really been a great transition, I think, in terms of how do we use new tools, but then how do we maybe enhance what we've done in the past, or even change it if it wasn't working as well.
Yeah, adaptive. I really appreciate the work you're doing with the youth. I think that's just an outstanding effort, and a lot of communities do not do that. And so congratulations on that. Do you anticipate that your council meetings will continue to be hybrid, where you'll have in person, but also virtual?
We are incorporating a virtual option for people to be able to access council meetings. I think that's been very helpful for folks. Also with our planning commission meetings, they are also, and Park and Rec Commission, they're all televised. And so they all have the opportunity for folks to participate virtually.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. That's awesome. This has been great conversation, great perspectives, a lot of neat ideas that you're all doing. I would love to just open this up and just see if there's anything else that any of you would like to add, or if there's any questions of each other that you might have. Anybody have anything? All right. Well, listen.
Quick question from.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to just ask Molly a quick question on your podcast and moderating the questions that are asked. Because I'm just kind of thinking through how we can make that work for us. I don't know that podcasts would work for our community, but we have a television station, so we certainly could have the opportunity to do programming that way. How do you pick which questions are asked and answered, and how do you manage expectations about questions that may be asked that don't get answered?
Right. So we honestly try to answer every one of them. So we don't really want to pick and choose, and there's always going to be those questions that we really don't want to answer that. But you want to stay, and a lot of people don't like this word, you want to stay transparent, because if you're going to have them trust you, answer it.
Yep.
So in the very beginning, yes, he was flooded with questions. And we had our mayor on a few times, and he's one of those mayors who's like, I'll tell you anything. Just ask me. I'm going to be honest with you. So we really don't strain the questions, put them through a strainer and see which ones, we want to answer. So we do answer all of them as best we can, whether it's going to be received well or not. We want to make them understand that some things are easier than other things. And it may make us uncomfortable to answer them, but we're going to answer them. And it has, like I said before, because we've answered those tough questions, it has the trust within the community has increased. And so it's worked. So my suggestion would be just answer all of them. Obviously, I can't answer things that are confidential. So some of those things aren't brought up. So if somebody does ask, well, what are you doing with this piece of property? You just have to, kind of delicately, let them know that it's not something we can discuss right now. But I wish we had a TV station. That would be fantastic. Maybe I need to look into that. That would be fantastic, because our university has one. So maybe we need to do that route instead, because people like to see the visual as well.
Yeah, no, it's a great concept. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And just to kind of piggyback on that, in a city I worked for before here in Minnesota, it was called North St. Paul Notes. And so it was on the cable access channel, and it was similar to the podcast, but just in front of the cameras. And so they had a different kind kind of city employee come on every week and just talk about what they do. And then just, I wish they had the Q&A though from the residents. That would have made it way more fun. But it was, what do you do? And then what's coming, down the pipeline? Talk a little bit about your projects. And so everyone got a chance to go through all the departments, and that was really valuable. And then people could watch it.
Yeah. One
That's
of the
great.
things
Oh, go
that
ahead.
are important is I really push our public service, our public works. The people don't realize what these guys and girls go through. I mean, it'll be 30 degrees outside and they're fixing a water main break. I think one of the biggest responses I received on LinkedIn is when I posted a video of one of our guys going underwater to cap a water main break. And you could see one of the public works employees above in a heavy jacket. And I think I got almost 200,000 hits on that. And because they were just like, we had no idea what these guys go through. So it's those little things that these podcasts, these videos, these things that they really make them see what the employees go through on a city level.
Yeah, totally appreciate that. Really important stuff to share, and very cool.
Yeah.
Let me just kind of wrap this up. I know that we're getting to the top of the hour. Thanks for sharing all of those perspectives. You're all kind of in this process of using your strategic thinking and to understand where the community priorities are around the ARPA program. And so that's a work kind of in progress, and still a lot of work to do in that particular area. I love, though, hearing about how you're using your community partners and benefiting from that input, particularly the work that Emily is doing around those neighborhoods. I really put a lot of value around those neighborhood engagement pieces, and all of you are doing that in various ways. All of you recognize the value of the virtual aspects and are taking advantage of that. But also some of the creative ways that you're taking advantage of helping people to connect and understand the value that the local governments, the podcast, Molly, I think is just a great example of that. So lots of great perspectives, lots of good things for sharing, and other people that are going to be seeing these segments are going to really value and benefit from. Thank you for spending the time today. I do these sessions every week, as I mentioned earlier, and I get the benefit of getting to know really nice people and hearing great ideas and things that are working in your community. I'll connect with you probably next week, and just to get your feedback and any suggestions or ideas that you have, what we can do for improving these kind of conversations. You'll start seeing your highlight segments probably next week, towards the end of next week, published on LinkedIn. Again, we're just trying to share ideas and things that are working for communities, and helping other folks that are dealing with the same kind of challenges. I hope this session was worthwhile for your time, and I really enjoyed hearing from all of you and getting a chance to talk with you a little bit. Corrin, thanks again for jumping in for this week's panel conversation, and just good luck with everything that you're doing. Molly, you've got your hands full with a lot of stuff going on, and so best of luck with all of that. Little Canada's always had cool stuff going on, so keep up the good work, Corrin, in that great community. And just look forward to staying in touch.